Mercer County Sheriff's Office.
Yes, I may be just totally off my rocker, but I was just out walking my dog, and I came across some bones that look to me to be human. Maybe they're not, but I was wondering if I could send those picture instructions, email them to you.
Okay, where did you find this at, ma'am?
Right on Coldwater Creek. I was over walking my dog, right where they're doing the construction.
Welcome to my channel. I'm Ben. Today, we step into a brutal disappearance turned grisly mystery. The torso of a young man found near a quiet Ohio creek, stripped of identity and left without a name for years. The cold comes off the water, first needling the skin, pressing the air flat. Along a narrow strip of brush by a creek that locals know by heart, a woman walks her dog and stops. Bones, not driftwood, not deer. Pale lengths rising out of frozen ground, like a warning. She takes a breath. She calls 911. Deputies move in measured steps, gloved hands. Eyes searching where the grass dapples the mud. Tape goes up. The creek keeps whispering. A torso is found. Most of a torso at least. The head is gone. The hands are gone. The feet are gone. On the cut surfaces, there are marks regular, deliberate teeth of a blade that bit and skipped and bit again. Whoever did this did not want a name attached to these remains. The early guesses narrow it, likely a man, somewhere between early 20s and mid-30s. No wallet, no phone, no face. Samples go to the lab. The machines hum and the databases stay silent. Weeks harden into months. Winter loosens its grip. The tape comes down. Somewhere out there, people go on living with an empty chair at a table and a question they do not say out loud. Back in the city, miles away and months behind, a roommate stops answering. Friends say he talked about leaving. There is talk of a ride, a new start, a plan that never quite made it onto paper. A car sits where it should not, for longer than it should. If he left, why did so much stay? If he chose to vanish, why does the ground beside a creek hold a story of blades and bags and the quiet patience of someone who cleaned? Time passes. A name will come later, pulled from the quiet by a patient analyst, and a match that should have been there from the beginning. And with the name will come a front door, a kitchen table, and a voice that calls what happened an accident. Until the second voice walks in and the timelines split. The bones were careful. The truth will not be. The town where these threads begin is unremarkable apartment blocks along busy roads, chain stores lit by neon, and small pockets of quiet that only look safe until you listen closely. It is here, in this landscape of Ohio and Kentucky crossings, that three lives collided. Ryan Zimmerman was only 21. Born in Kentucky, he grew up with more longing than stability. Friends described him as soft-spoken, shy, until he trusted you, a young man still shaping his sense of identity. He sought belonging, a place where someone might finally see him not as a burden, but as a partner. When the opportunity came to move in with people who seemed open and unconventional, he believed it might be the new start he needed. Sarah Buzzard presented herself as steady. In reality, she was anything but. She had married young, trying to build permanence out of an unsteady hand. Her marriage to Corey was already strained fights about money, about love, about fidelity. Sarah was searching for validation, caught between resentment and hope. On the surface, she held a bachelor's degree and spoke with calm logic. Underneath, she struggled with anxiety, depression, and a growing sense that her life was slipping away from her control. Corey, Sarah's husband, added fuel to that fire. His view of relationships was fluid, experimental. He insisted that happiness might require more than two people. When he found Ryan online, Corey saw potential not just as a roommate, But as someone who could be folded into a vision of love that Sarah never accepted, the invitation went out. Ryan arrived with a suitcase, a used car, and the fragile trust of someone who wanted to believe promises. Into this unstable household stepped one more presence, Jennifer, also known as Naira. She met Sarah online, first as a friend, then as something more for Sarah. Jennifer became both confidant and escape. Yet Jennifer also brought her own shadows, disliking Ryan from the start, resenting the triangle that pulled at Sarah's loyalties. The apartment soon became less of a home and more of a fault line. Ryan struggled to find work. He paid rent with what little money he had, but his presence amplified the couple's fractures. Sarah resented him. Corey defended him. Jennifer ignored him. What was supposed to be cooperative, living hardened into silent meals, closed bedroom doors, and whispered arguments through thin walls. These dynamics, youth searching for acceptance, a marriage already unraveling, and a girlfriend caught between jealousy and loyalty, were a recipe for pressure. Sarah was forced to mediate between a husband who demanded unconventional love and a roommate who symbolized her own failures. Ryan, meanwhile, pleaded for a chance, sensing that he might be pushed out, but not understanding how dangerous the resentment around him had become. The questions hang here. Was Ryan's presence merely the trigger for tensions already destined to explode? Or did something in his quiet, desperate need for belonging ignite a fury in Sarah that went beyond reason? Behind closed doors, the stage was set. The pressure would not hold forever. It began as a weekend, like so many others, quiet, domestic, with tension hiding under the hum of appliances and the weight of unsaid words. But by the end of it, the small Columbus apartment would carry the memory of violence so severe it could never be washed out completely. Ryan Zimmerman was restless. He had already been told that his time in the apartment was ending. He begged for one more chance, pleaded with Sarah to let him stay. But Sarah was exhausted by his presence, angry at Corey for bringing him in, and increasingly dependent on Jennifer, who loathed Ryan from the start. The fragile truce inside the apartment collapsed one night when emotions, jealousy, and despair fused into a single act. Sarah would later describe it as, "Sudden, I was angry, and I snapped." Ryan had just stepped out of the bathroom. The door opened, light spilling into the hallway. Sarah moved quickly, sliding behind him, locking her arm around his neck. The chokehold was clumsy but relentless. Ryan struggled, surprised. His voice cut short. In seconds, his body went limp, and Sarah, panicked, kept holding until there was nothing left to fight. When she finally let go, Ryan's skin had gone pale. His chest did not rise again. Silence filled the apartment. Jennifer came upstairs after hearing the commotion. She found Sarah trembling beside Ryan's body. The shock of what had happened, sank in one moment of rage, had ended a life. But instead of calling for help, the two women chose concealment. Fear guided them now, not conscience. The bathroom became a crime scene. Sarah dragged Ryan's body into the tub. She found a saw in the shed, metal teeth, dulled with rust, but still capable of cutting. Jennifer tried to help, but soon turned away, nauseated. Sarah did most of the work herself. She cut at the joint's elbows, wrists, knees, ankles, and neck. She packed the limbs into black trash bags, sealing them with tape. The air filled with the chemical tang of bleach and vinegar as they tried to clean. Ryan's belongings were stuffed into bins. His clothes, his few possessions, all reminders of who he was, were mixed with the evidence of his death. When it came time to move the remains, they turned to Ryan's own car. But the plan faltered when the car wouldn't start after Sarah drove it to a gas station. Embarrassed and desperate, she called a tow truck. The car was left near the complex, but the bin containing Ryan's remains was moved to Sarah's vehicle. The night stretched on as they drove, exhaustion heavy in Sarah's eyes. They stopped at dumpsters, gas stations, places where shadows might hide the truth. Bags disappeared into public bins, smaller pieces scattered along the road, but the torso remained heavy, unmistakable. Eventually, they reached Mercer County, in the town of Salina, and there, in a patch of woods near Coldwater Creek, they abandoned what was left. Sarah later admitted she could not go farther. She wanted to drive to Illinois, to disappear into distance, but fatigue stopped her. She returned home instead, phone switched off, terrified of Corey's questions. When she walked through the apartment door, Corey was waiting, angry that she had ignored his calls, oblivious to the fact that Ryan was gone forever. Days turned to weeks. Ryan's car vanished, likely moved by someone else. His absence was explained away with rumors of a new boyfriend, a move to another city. Anything but the truth. The women lived with the silence, hiding behind their routines, pretending the weekend had been ordinary. But the woods do not forget. On January 3rd, 2016, a woman walking her dog stumbled upon the torso. She thought it might be animal bones, then froze when the shape spoke differently. She dialed 911, her voice apologetic. "Unsure, I may be off my rocker, but I think I found human bones." Deputies arrived, and within hours, the scene was locked down. The torso bore saw marks. The head, hands, and feet were gone. The victim could not be named. DNA testing produced no matches. For 4 long years, Ryan Zimmerman remained a John Doe. His family unaware, his story suspended, but the evidence was there, waiting. The cut bones, the missing parts, the deliberate effort to erase identity, all of it pointed to murder, not accident. And eventually, patient investigation would tie those remains back to the apartment in Columbus. To the women who had thought bleach and fear could keep the truth buried, the night of violence had left echoes too loud to silence. Sarah's voice in interrogation would one day falter, breaking under the weight of what she had done. But back in that weekend moment, with Ryan's body cooling in the bathroom and Jennifer urging her to think fast, Sarah believed she still had control. She believed the story could be managed, erased, forgotten. But control is an illusion, and the truth, no matter how delayed, always waits for the moment. It can no longer be denied. The case began cold, and for years it stayed that way. Detectives had bones but no name, saw marks but no clear suspect. The torso found near Coldwater Creek offered few paths forward: no head to compare dental records, no hands for fingerprints, no immediate DNA match in the system. Forensic experts noted deliberate dismemberment. This was not disposal born of panic alone. It was methodical. Someone wanted Ryan Zimmerman to vanish completely. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation worked the samples. Profiles were uploaded, checked against national databases. Nothing. Ryan had been missing since 2015, but his family had never submitted DNA, leaving investigators without the one link they needed. The case stalled. Boxes of evidence sat in storage. Photographs collected dust, and a John Doe lay unidentified in official records. Time moved on. 4 years later, in 2020, analyst Jennifer Lester reviewed old missing person files. She cross-referenced details, scanning case notes that others had nearly forgotten. A young man named Ryan Zimmerman caught her attention. His family's DNA had never been collected. The oversight was glaring. Samples were finally taken. When tested, they matched. The John Doe was no longer nameless. He was Ryan Zimmerman, 21 years old, vanished from Columbus, Ohio, With the identification, momentum returned. Detectives looked back at Ryan's last known connections, Sarah Buzzard, her then-husband Corey, and Sarah's girlfriend, Jennifer, also known as Naira. The dynamics of that apartment, once vague, became central. Interviews began. Corey described Ryan's arrival, his relationship with Ryan, and his decision to push him out. Sarah gave her version, stumbling through timelines, contradicting herself. Detectives noted her unease, the gaps in memory that did not feel natural. The car became another thread. Ryan's vehicle had been seen at the complex, then moved, then gone. Investigators traced ownership. They tracked down the car after it had been sold on, examining it for traces. DNA evidence tied the vehicle back to Sarah. The story about a tow truck and embarrassment over driving Ryan's car unraveled under scrutiny. Detectives pressed harder. In interrogation, Sarah tried to hold steady. She claimed Ryan simply left, drove off with someone else, never returned. But evidence weighed against her. DNA, timelines, and Corey's statements painted a different picture. Under pressure, Sarah faltered. Her voice cracked. She admitted to anger, to a chokehold, to panic. Then came the most chilling detail. She and Jennifer had cut Ryan's body apart in the bathtub. Charges followed quickly. Sarah Buzzard was indicted for aggravated murder, abuse of a corpse, tampering with evidence, and theft of a motor vehicle. Detectives also moved to arrest Jennifer, but she would never stand trial. When officers approached her, she pulled a gun from her purse and ended her own life. The case that had lain dormant for 4 years now surged forward with undeniable weight. The remains in Mercer County were no longer anonymous. The missing man had a name, and the woman who thought bleach, vinegar, and silence could erase, her crime was finally facing court. The investigation was not just about evidence, it was about persistence, the patience to reopen old files, to see connections where others saw dead ends. Without that persistence, Ryan Zimmerman's story might still be unsolved, his remains still a question mark in the system. Instead, detectives could now place him back into the narrative of his short, turbulent life, and place Sarah Buzzard in the defendant's chair. But how would a jury respond to her claims of an accident? Could anger turned fatal ever be separated from intent? The answers would only come once the courtroom doors opened. The courthouse was not grand, just another county building with beige walls and the smell of coffee drifting from a vending machine. But inside, the atmosphere was electric. After years of silence, the story of Ryan Zimmerman's disappearance was finally unfolding in front of a jury. Sarah Buzzard entered in handcuffs, her frame smaller than the crimes described. She kept her head down, hair pulled back, face pale under fluorescent lights. To one side sat the prosecution, files stacked in neat piles. On the other, the defense, leaning close, whispering strategy. The families of those involved filled the benches. Ryan's relatives, clutching tissues. Sarah's mother staring straight ahead, trying not to cry. The prosecution began with the bones, photographs of the torso, images of saw marks, slides that jurors could barely look at. They spoke of deliberate cuts, of bleach and vinegar, meant to erase what had been done. They called it murder planned, executed, and hidden. Witnesses took the stand. Detectives recounted the discovery near Coldwater Creek, the years of waiting, the eventual DNA match. A forensic analyst explained the saw marks controlled, purposeful. This was not clumsy panic, it was method. Interrogation footage played next. Sarah's own voice filling the room. I was angry. I snapped. I choked him. I cut him up. Jurors leaned forward, some frowning, some shaking their heads. The defense tried to shift the story. They emphasized Sarah's mental health, her history of anxiety and depression. They called her confession the words of a terrified woman cornered by detectives. They suggested that Ryan's death was not premeditated, but a tragic accident in a household boiling with tension. They pointed to Corey, his unconventional demands, his role in bringing Ryan into the home. Was Sarah truly the only one to blame? But Jennifer's absence loomed over the courtroom. Her suicide, when police came to arrest her, was framed by the prosecution as silent confirmation of guilt. The defense tried to cast it as despair, not admission. Yet the void where her testimony should have been only deepened the sense that Sarah and Jennifer had acted together. Ryan's family gave their statements. His mother spoke quietly, voice breaking as she described, waiting for a call that never came, searching for her son's face in crowds, holding onto hope even when logic told her otherwise. She described the moment she learned the John Doe was Ryan, how her knees gave out, how her world collapsed. Jurors wiped their eyes. The prosecution closed by reminding the jury that Ryan was 21 years old, with a life ahead of him, cut short, not by chance, but by choice. They asked for accountability. The defense closed by asking for mercy, arguing that Sarah was not a monster, but a broken woman in a broken marriage, pushed to the edge. They urged the jury to see accident rather than intent, but jurors had seen the photographs. They had heard the confession, and they knew that Ryan's torso lay in the ground for 4 years while Sarah lived her life, silent. The verdict would not come instantly. Deliberations stretched as jurors weighed anger against intent, panic against planning. But the weight of evidence was heavy, and soon the question would no longer be about guilt, but about how many years Sarah would serve before the chance of freedom. On the surface, Sarah Buzzard's story sounds like sudden rage, a flash of anger that spiraled into irreversible violence. But beneath that surface lies a deeper pattern, an erosion of control, a storm of unmet needs, and a distorted sense of power that shaped her choices. Sarah grew up craving stability, but her adult life delivered little of it. She married early, trying to anchor herself to a future she imagined safe. Instead, she found herself bound to Corey, a man who redefined love in ways she never embraced. He wanted a third partner, believed fulfillment meant testing boundaries. Sarah resented it, but she yielded until resentment turned into silent rage. When Ryan entered their home, he embodied everything Sarah hated: Corey's defiance, her own inability to say no, and the threat of being replaced. Psychologists often describe this as displacement of anger. Rather than confronting Corey directly, Sarah turned her fury toward Ryan, the more vulnerable figure in the household. His youth, his dependence, and his pleas for acceptance made him the easiest target. Sarah could not stop Corey's demands, but she could assert dominance over Ryan. The chokehold was not just violence, it was Sarah reclaiming power she felt stripped of for years. Jennifer's role added another dimension. She was Sarah's confidant, her escape, the one who validated her feelings of being wronged. But Jennifer also carried jealousy and contempt for Ryan, feeding the narrative that he did not belong. When Sarah lashed out, Jennifer did not stop her. She helped conceal it. Psychologists call this mutual reinforcement. When two partners amplify each other's worst impulses, alone, Sarah might have broken down and confessed. With Jennifer, she believed secrecy was survival. The dismemberment reveals something even darker. Cutting a body is not simply disposal, it is psychological distancing. By fragmenting Ryan into pieces, Sarah tried to fragment her guilt. Each bag of remains was an attempt to turn a human life into manageable objects. Forensic psychologists note that such acts often reflect both fear and control. Fear of being caught, control in reducing the victim to something less than human. Yet Sarah's own words betray the truth. "I ruined my life," she said in interrogation. Not "I ended his life." The focus was inward, on her loss, her future. This self-centered framing suggests narcissistic tendencies, where empathy is eclipsed by personal consequence. She did not see Ryan as a full person in those final moments, but as a problem to be erased. Legally, her defense argued accident, but intent is not always planned days ahead. In law, intent can exist in the seconds someone chooses not to release a chokehold, the minutes they spend finding a saw, the hours they devote to scrubbing a bathroom. Every step Sarah took reinforced her responsibility. Her mental health struggles, anxiety, depression were real, but they did not compel murder. They shaped vulnerability, not inevitability. Ryan's death is also a lesson in the psychology of neglect. He wanted belonging so badly that he accepted a toxic arrangement. He overlooked warning signs, endured coldness, and trusted people unworthy of his trust. His need for acceptance placed him in harm's way. In many crimes, victims are not targeted for who they are, but for what they represent, an imbalance of power. Ryan represented Sarah's resentment, and he paid with his life. What lingers in this analysis is not just the horror of violence, but the ordinariness of its roots. Failed relationships, jealousy, control, patterns repeated in households across the country. Though most never escalate to blood, that ordinariness makes the case chilling, because if these fractures could erupt here, they could erupt anywhere. And so the courtroom asked, was Sarah Buzzard a broken woman pushed too far? Or was she a calculating killer who found relief in dominance? The answer, as always, lies somewhere between psychology and law, between human weakness and human choice. When the verdict came, it ended years of uncertainty. In January of 2022, Sarah Buzzard stood before the court and entered a guilty plea to aggravated murder. She was sentenced to 30 years to life in prison. The courtroom was quiet as the words were read. No cheers, no outbursts. Only the heavy silence of justice carried out too late for Ryan Zimmerman. Corey, the man at the center of the tangled relationships, was never charged. Investigators concluded he had no knowledge of Ryan's death. Yet his decisions, inviting Ryan into the home, insisting on arrangements Sarah despised, hung like shadows over the entire case. He left the courthouse a free man, but his choices remained woven into the tragedy. Jennifer, Sarah's girlfriend and accomplice, never saw a courtroom. When police came for her, she reached into her purse, pulled a gun, and ended her life. That act robbed Ryan's family of more answers, leaving only speculation about how much she pushed, how much she helped, and what demons drove her final choice. The public reaction was swift. In Ohio and Kentucky, newspapers ran headlines about the torso in the creek finally being identified. True crime forums lit up with debates. Was Sarah a cold-blooded killer, or a broken woman trapped in a toxic triangle? Interrogation footage spread across YouTube, with millions of viewers analyzing every pause, every tremor in her voice. Some saw manipulation. Others saw guilt eating her alive. For Ryan's family, the aftermath was quieter, but heavier. They buried their son years after he vanished. The mystery of his disappearance finally resolved, but never healed. His mother said that even knowing the truth, she still caught herself scanning faces in a crowd, half expecting Ryan to walk back into view. Grief had no neat ending. In Mercer County, where the torso was found, locals still remember the day the woman walking her dog made that call. The creek became a place people passed with unease, a reminder that horror can lie inches beneath the soil. The case also raised broader questions. How many other unidentified remains sit in storage, waiting for a DNA match. How many families live with silence because of missed connections, uncollected samples, or overlooked files? Ryan's case proved that persistence can bring closure, but it also showed how long justice can be delayed. For Sarah, prison walls now mark her days. For Jennifer, there is no redemption. For Corey, freedom comes with ghosts he cannot fully shake. And for Ryan, there is at last a gravestone, with his name and end that should have come with a full life, not a torso in the woods. The story closes, but it does not rest, because the truth about human violence is that it echoes through families, through communities, through time. And the echo of Ryan Zimmerman's death will never truly fade. In every true crime case, there is more than just the violence. We are forced to see the fragile lines that separate conflict from catastrophe. Ryan Zimmerman was only 21, a young man searching for belonging, yet he walked into a household where love, jealousy, and resentment mixed like fuel, waiting for a spark. His story reminds us how dangerous it can be when emotional struggles are ignored and when toxic relationships go unchecked. One detail that lingers is how long Ryan remained unidentified. For 4 long years, his torso lay in storage while his family searched, hoping for answers. It took persistence, a DNA match, and one analyst who refused to let the file gather dust. That lesson matters. Closure does not come quickly, but it comes when people refuse to give up. The warning here is clear. Red flags in relationships, the imbalance of power, the demand for control, the silence of unresolved anger are not just private matters. They can escalate, sometimes into violence no one imagines possible. What do you think? Do you believe Sarah's act was a sudden accident of rage? Or was it the result of years of resentment that finally boiled over? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you value stories that dig beneath the headlines, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us in uncovering the truths that still matter.